Guess what? The Cybertruck is back online and you can pre-order one now, only there are no prices or configurations. And has Tesla actually changed the shape of the Cybertruck? Also, the FAA, not SpaceX, is being sued over the recent Starship launch. And in really good news, it looks like Europe might actually get full self-driving sooner than we thought. Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. I am going to start with Tesla's page. This is tesla.com/Cybertruck. Pretty easy, or you can go to the menu in the right and look for it. It's not like at the little set of tabs across the top, but you can easily find it by either typing in /Cybertruck or just going up to the menu and looking for it. Anyway, you can see you got order now. They got the shape of the thing. We're going to get back to this shape right here. And exoskeleton, a bunch of information about it, blah, blah, blah. So all of that kind of stuff. But if we click on the order now, you will be able to see if once it loads up and everything. So you can see due today $100, you will be able to complete your configuration as production nears. So sadly, we still have no idea how much the Cybertruck is going to cost. Interestingly enough, it's $100 rather than the 250, which is now what the Model Y, Model 3, I think the Model S and Model X are also 250, but those actually might be more. I'm not in the market for those, so I don't generally look at those deposits. But anyway, it's still $100 like it was a couple of years ago when it first came out. So anyway, for people who are sad they missed out on the initial Cybertruck order window, you can go and pre-order one again now. And speaking of the Cybertruck, there have been a lot of rumors that the shape of the Cybertruck has changed, and in particular this end of the Cybertruck, that it has become much more stubby than it used to be. But I've got some interesting evidence that that either isn't the case or that Tesla might be putting old pictures online. So from the Cybertruck order page, I took that side-on view because this is the closest one I could find from an initial version of the Cybertruck that was announced a while back. I don't remember exactly which one this one is, but it's certainly not the new production version because it doesn't even have the side view mirrors and stuff. So probably this was the initial Cybertruck launch video. If we overlay that with just the Cybertruck from the new one, and I did my best to like kind of smush them on top of each other. They don't fit perfectly, obviously, because it's not quite the same angle. And of course, the really interesting thing is here, if you look at this, there are no side view mirrors on this one as well. So as far as I can tell, this is the original version of the Cybertruck right here that they've got pictures of online. So it looks like they're sort of cheating and that they're using the old version of it. So these two are identical with each other. So what I did was I went and found the best matching photo I could find from in the wild pictures, which was something Sawyer Merritt posted a few days ago. I'm going to delete the middle one here. So we've got the original one and we can look at the new Cybertruck here. So unfortunately, you can tell that the angle is not the same. So it's very, very difficult to judge this exactly. But if we look at it, you can definitely see now we've got the windshield wiper and we've got, of course, the side view mirrors. So this is definitely the new version of it. And of course, it looks like the bar across the front is significantly smaller. But anyway, if we do a little trickery with opacity, you can see that the back wheels and the back tailgate and everything line up basically the same. But the front definitely has a slightly different shape and it's more squared off in the front. And if I was taking a guess, it's very slightly shorter. Again, they said 5%, so we're not looking at that much. But again, remember that the angle of this is not exactly side on. So we might be getting an optical illusion. We can also overlay the edges on top of this. So you might be able to see this a little bit easier over the old one, that you can see that the back matches up for the most part. But as we get up to the peak of the vehicle and start to come down, it's a very slightly steeper angle and then it's flat on the front. So the basic deal here is if you're looking at Tesla's pre-order website, they're showing you the old pictures really interestingly that they just put this back up again online and yet they're showing us the original pictures. Now it is possible that they just turned the website back on again and it's what they originally had and they haven't updated it. I haven't checked that to be sure. So anyway, again, it looks like there might be a small possibility that the front of the vehicle has been shrunk up just a little bit and pressed downward. It is definitely a more squared off front. The whole light bar around this area has obviously changed, and there are some other subtle design cue changes as well, including the fact that there are no more door handles here, as is obvious. But I'm not seeing a ton of evidence that the vehicle is particularly much more snub-nosed. Again, it's going to have to wait until we get direct side-on views of the new production model, and then we'd be able to compare it. This view is obviously giving us a little bit of false information because we're seeing more of the nose than we do in the direct side-on view. But the really interesting part about all of this is the fact that Tesla is showing us on their order page this version of the truck, which is clearly the old one. And if you compare that to the new one, you can definitely see, you know, windshield wiper, side view mirrors, no door handles, and a different light bar. And if you take that away, this is what's actually on their order page, which is a very different looking truck. So anyway, it's curious that they're not showing us the latest version, but Tesla might be sort of waiting for the unveil to really show off the new version of the truck. All right, now on to the potentially rather disastrous news here. And this is an interesting tactic here. So this is from NBC News. And of course, I'll put a link to this in the description if you're interested in looking. FAA sued over SpaceX Starship launch program following April explosion. Not just one, 5 environmental and cultural heritage groups are suing the Federal Aviation Administration over the agency's dealings with SpaceX. So the interesting tactic here is that they're not going after SpaceX directly. And that is a very curious thing because we know that Elon Musk is kind of a litigation, you know, monster. He's like, fine, you want to fight me? I'll fight you. So it looks like what they've done is they've done an end around, and by suing the FAA, I think that what they can do is lock up SpaceX so that they can't make any more launches in the meantime. So let's read some of the article here. 5 environmental and cultural heritage groups are suing the FAA, alleging that the agency violated the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, I guess, when it allowed SpaceX to launch the largest rocket ever built from its Boca Chica, Texas facility without a comprehensive environmental review, according to court filings obtained by CNBC. And by the by, as far as I understand it, there was a very comprehensive environmental review that happened. Now, of course, I don't know all of the details, but I do know that there was a lot of time and effort put into an environmental review of the Boca Chica area, the beach, the wildlife refuge, etc., etc. So I'm not exactly sure where this is coming from, but maybe it wasn't a comprehensive enough review, according to the litigants. So here we get some fantastic reporting here. SpaceX's Starship Super Heavy test flight on April 20th blew up the company's launch pad. That is without a doubt not true. It definitely scoured it. It definitely excavated it. It did not blow it up. Hurling chunks of concrete and metal sheets thousands of feet away into sensitive habitat, spreading particulate matter, including pulverized concrete for miles, and sparking a 3.5-acre fire on state park lands near the launch site. And here we have some fun about the US court system. I don't know why they did this, but it's in Washington, D.C. The lawsuit against the FAA was filed in a district court in Washington, D.C. on Monday by plaintiffs including the Center for Biological Diversity, the American Bird Conservancy, Surfrider Foundation, Save Rio Grande Valley, Save RGV, and a cultural heritage organization, the Carrizo Comecrudo Nation of Texas. The groups argue that the FAA should have conducted an in-depth environmental report known as an Environmental Impact Statement, EIS, before ever allowing SpaceX to move ahead with its Starship Super Heavy plans in Boca Chica. Again, I thought that they had done this. Maybe they didn't do a good enough one. I don't know. And just FYI here, they show this picture of the aftermath of the flight termination system here. And if you're not paying attention and you don't know what's going on, you might think that was an explosion on the pad. So very poor reporting on NBC News' part. Continuing, they wrote, quote, "The FAA failed to take the requisite hard look at the proposed project and has concluded that significant adverse effects will not occur due to purported mitigation measures." That sentence doesn't make a ton of sense because maybe it should be will have concluded that significant adverse effects will not occur. I don't know. Anyway, I think what they're saying basically is they didn't look hard enough. They should have done a more in-depth study, and then they would have found that this stuff would have happened. The plaintiffs argue that the agency waived the need for more thorough analysis based on proposed environmental mitigations, but the mitigations the FAA actually required of SpaceX were woefully insufficient to offset environmental damages from launch events, construction, and increased traffic in the area, as well as, quote, anomalies like the destruction of the launch pad and mid-air explosion in April. So at least they said mid-air explosion. I don't know if the destruction of the launch pad is an anomaly, but I guess it was not predicted, so therefore it was sort of anomalous. In their complaint, the attorneys note that the FAA's own chief of staff for the Office of Commercial Space Transportation in June 2020 said the agency was planning an EIS. Later, based on SpaceX's preferences, the lawyers wrote, the federal agency settled on using a considerably less thorough analysis, which enabled SpaceX to launch sooner. So this all seems to hinge on the quality of the EIS, it appears, right? Apparently what they're saying is they should have done a hard environmental impact study and they did an easy environmental impact study. It's unclear to me whether there is any difference, whether there are different versions of the EIS or something you can do, or whether they believe that what happened was they allowed SpaceX to skate without checking all the boxes that they needed to. But anyway, as far as I know, the EIS was fairly in-depth and it was pretty rigorous, and SpaceX had to deal with it. So all of this stuff more than likely is going to come to naught, except that what it could do is tie the FAA up in court, and the FAA can't issue any licenses to SpaceX to launch again until they've either gotten a judge to say that they're going to hold a stay on things, or this case is thrown out, or the FAA wins the case or something like that. If we actually have to take this to court and, go through all the steps of that, it could be a couple of years before they're able to get along with this. The US legal system is not a fast thing. So the only hope the FAA has at this point is that a judge will say that while this is going on, you can continue operations as needed in Boca Chica, but in my mind, that's relatively unlikely. And so the clever thing here is by not attacking SpaceX directly, Gwen Shotwell, Elon Musk, etc. cannot get into the fight and can't actually have an argument against this and can't, aggressively pursue these other entities. Meanwhile, what they can do is they can go after the government. The government is notoriously very slow. They probably don't expect to win any of this stuff, but they do expect to tie them up in court for several years. And this is all to the detriment of SpaceX and their ambitious goals. It's all to the detriment of NASA that needs the Starship for the human landing system, all to the detriment of South Texas and that area around Brownsville that needs the economic impact because Tesla could just decide to pack up and leave and go to Florida instead. And by the by, it also makes Scott Walter and my proposal to do single stage to orbit with the Starship upper stage from Boca Chica, which you can see here if you haven't seen it yet. Anyway, it makes that concept even more appealing than it would have been previously. So if they're grounded and can't launch the Super Heavy, they've already gotten permission and they've done all the environmental impact studies and all that kind of stuff for Starship. So they could launch the Starship on its own. They could put it into orbit without any payload. And again, we did the video, we did the math, the basic math works out. They could do all of that stuff and collect data while all this other stuff is going on in court. So if SpaceX's plans with the Super Heavy booster are thwarted, they could actually turn to trying to do SSTO in the meantime. And in much more positive news from Electro Timmy on Twitter, and follow him if you're not. Anyway, this was pretty much breaking right as I started to record this video. There is some exciting news regarding the UNECE regulation on driver control assistance systems, or DCAS, that enables FSD beta in Europe. So basically, regulatory body in Europe that has control over when Tesla is going to be able to release full self-driving beta in Europe. As I've reported on before, initially the final draft was expected to be completed in 2024, which would have meant that the full self-driving couldn't have received approval until January of 2025, because these regulations don't take effect until the beginning of the next calendar year. So that is a very, very long delay, almost 2 years from now. Now the European Commission intends to give the DCAS the highest priority and wants to complete it this year. The final draft is expected to be ready as early as September of this year. This means that FSD beta could be possible in Europe at the earliest by January of 2024 and at the latest by the summer of 2024. So actually, my apologies, it's actually January 1st or July 1st, I believe. So anyway, it's half year, not full year. But anyway, this could accelerate things from 6 months to a full year. And that is a huge, huge deal for Europeans who want to try full self-driving beta, but also for Tesla itself, which wants to release FSD beta in more markets. Finishing up here, to accelerate the process, hands-on phase 1 will be separated from hands-off phase 2. I believe that's referring to this kind of stuff holding the steering wheel. Therefore, regardless of whether hands-off is allowed in the US by then, only hands-on will be allowed for us until phase 2 is completed. It will also be discussed whether a closed testing phase can be allowed before the approval in January of 2024. So it appears the original regulation was to do full hands-off immediately, as opposed to what's going on in the United States at this point, and Canada as well, which is that you have to have your hand on the wheel or, resting on it or something like that, that they're going to break this into 2 pieces and they will allow the hands-on immediately as soon as they can, and they'll save the hands-off part of it for later regulation. Interestingly enough, it is curious that they're actually looking to the United States and the US's regulations about how full self-driving is working to make determinations about what they're doing. In a general sense, the United States' regulations tend to be reactive, where the European unions tend to be proactive. So the US is like, until a plane crashes, everything is fine, just go fly your planes around, and then planes start crashing and they're like, oops, we got to put regulations in place. Whereas Europe is much more like, hey, wait a second, we need to design these things safely and make sure nothing could ever happen before we allow any planes to take off in our area. So of course, the disadvantage in the US is that people could be hurt and killed because there aren't regulations until bad things happen, and that's an advantage in the EU. The disadvantage for the EU is that it's very difficult for technological innovation to happen because all of these regulatory hurdles have to be passed before you're even allowed to implement that technology. So this is a really good step on the EU's part. This is going to bump them up in terms of the queue of when full self-driving, not just Tesla's full self-driving, but any type of autonomous driving can happen. And as I've said in videos before, it's very important to the economy of nations that they actually get on board with full self-driving, because it's going to be a huge labor and cost saver over time as full autonomy happens. So again, great news for Tesla and great news for my European friends who I know have been waiting forever for full self-driving beta. And thank you so much, Claudia, my German office, for alerting me to this tweet just as I was going to do my video. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video about the Cybertruck, about the FAA being sued about SpaceX, and about the European Union perhaps allowing full self-driving beta as soon as the beginning of 2024. If you did enjoy it, please do like it so other people can find it, because that's how YouTube's algorithm works. And of course, consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon. Thank you all so much. I truly do appreciate your support, and I really enjoy the conversations that we have on Discord. And of course, if you want to join the team, just check out the link in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, success is a possible outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on. So check it out. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a solar roof, a power wall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.